Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm Paul Brooker, and today I am joined by a new guest to the show, Emma Marshall. Hello, Emma. How are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Oh, I'm not too bad at all. It's not raining, and that to me is a good day in the UK. Emma, just for those out there who are watching you for the first time, could you just give us a little bit of a backstory as to who you are?
Yeah, my name is Emma, and I am from the town of Redditch, which is in the middle of England. In fact, it's famous for needles. There was a famous play that said, "You can't find a haystack in Redditch for all the needles." So I am a mom of four, and recently I've started doing TikToks to talk about different issues that I've been going down rabbit holes myself on, and one of those was the Fabian Society, which is why you've asked me to come and have a chat.
Oh, most definitely, because you did catch our eyes when we saw your video on the Fabian Society. Now, a lot of our audience are probably already aware of it, but just for those who are not aware of it, what is the Fabian Society?
So before Labour was even really Labour, they had this secret society called the Fabian Society. To be a member of the Fabian Society, you have to be a Labour member. Every single Labour MP, well, a Labour leader, so Tony Blair and Keir Starmer, have been members of the Fabian Society. It's a very secretive society, and it was created in 1884. One of the founders was George Bernard Shaw, who famously believed in eugenics and that people should prove their worth every 5 to 7 years in front of a jury, and if they couldn't prove their worth, they should be executed. This is the kind of beliefs that they held at the very start. They might say they don't believe that now, but their logo was a wolf in sheep's clothing. Their idea was to infiltrate society very slowly, nothing radical, just little tiny policy changes here and there, little tiny tweaks, that they would take control of our education, of our media, of judges, the judicial system. And when we look now, we can see that this very much has happened, and it's by design. Now, when we look at George Orwell's 1984, that was because he thought it was going to take 100 years for them to enact this. So George Orwell was actually part of the Fabian Society, and when he saw how sinister this was, he left, and that's when he wrote Animal Farm and 1984.
Oh, wow. See, I didn't know this because they are very dark stories indeed. And now we're starting to get some context behind that. And I've just literally looked at their website now, and it just says the Fabian Society is Britain's oldest political think tank. Now, I've got to ask, what gives them the right to say how they think the country, the world should be run? Because surely it's down to the people, isn't it? That's why we elect in our officials.
Yeah, so this is how do they take control through the back door? So rather than us electing in socialists, they believe that they infiltrate slowly, and then they change that Overton window. They change our public perception. Things like introducing the trans ideology so that they can create a them and us. When you create division, you can control the people far easier. So when they say diversity is our strength, that's actually around also being able to control us far more, because you diversify too much and you call everybody racist, you can silence them. We've been seeing that for a long, long time. You say, oh, you're racist, you're far right, you're Nazi, you're fascist. It shuts down that conversation, and you end up feeling terrified to speak out as somebody who disagrees with the socialist values that they're trying to bring in. It's very undemocratic.
Yeah, and also just to add on to that, it's the scary things that can come from it because no more so in the UK, we're now hearing the rumours again of digital ID, and they're saying that this is going to be to help tackle the migration problem. Well, how's that going to help tackle it? The only way to tackle it, and this is in my own personal opinion, is to stop the illegal migrants arriving in the first place. You can see they use things to justify the Online Speech Act. That's just come in. That was supposed to be about protecting children. Now everybody and his dog's getting arrested because you posted a meme online.
Oh, absolutely. And this is killing freedom of speech. It is taking over the control of us being able to walk around freely. And let's be fair, they've put into control of our bank accounts so that they can get into our bank accounts easier. They can look at whether or not we're giving friends and family some money. So what's next? Are they going to say for somebody who's had a food bank voucher that that food bank voucher is now classed as kind of a payment of some kind? And well, we can't be having that. So these controls that they're putting in very slowly, they are with that end purpose of being able to silence us, bring in the thought police. I mean, the fact that there was a Christian lady who was arrested for praying silently in her head. Yes, it was near to an abortion centre, but she wasn't saying anything out loud. She was praying for those who were going in. She didn't say anything, and she got arrested. Now, that is thought police in action, and that's terrifying to me.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And thought police, freedom of speech police, you name it. I mean, the UK has quite possibly become North Korea in my eyes. Uh, Honestly,
Yeah,
that is where we are at. We are a few steps away of people just getting thrown into vans and disappearing.
but at
And that's
least
a
they had
scary
the offer
place.
of free, they had the offer of free bread. They were told they give up their rights, they'll never go hungry. We haven't been told that, so it's not
No.
even as good as the lie that the North Koreans were sold on that. It's just being one little tiny bit. So I'll talk about one where I think everyone will look at this and go, oh yes, so the euthanasia bill, assisted suicide. It sounds on the surface of it, oh yes, why should we allow people to suffer? We don't allow our pets to suffer like that. So it makes perfect sense. But then when you learn about George Bernard Shaw and his idea around eugenics, and that eugenics was very much a left-wing ideal, they distanced themselves away from that when we had Hitler, but it was very much what they wanted. Those who are undesirable, let's just get rid of them. Well, this is that very thin end of the wedge for how they then start with going, okay, well, the doctors can now decide on your behalf, just like with DNR. To have the do not resuscitate, it used to be the family or the person would choose that for themselves. Now it's doctors are choosing whether or not you are do not resuscitate. And that will be what happens when they end up getting this assisted dying bill through. You will see that they will start to push and push and push. We see in Canada people able to commit suicide because they are depressed. Being depressed is a short-term condition. There is treatments out there for depression, yet people are being allowed to commit suicide legally for it. I think we have to instead look to how we give dignity to those who are dying, dignity to those who are struggling with long-term illnesses, and dignity to those who have got mental health conditions.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, what worries me, and I've got a friend who works in the medical industry, when we give doctors absolute power, there's something that you need to understand. They are human beings. They have good days, they have bad days. Dare I say it? And I didn't know this, and this is going back a few years now. When new doctors start, the death rates go up in hospitals. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. So, and then you've got organ donation to add into that fact. And that's another thing that can influence decisions. And I'm sorry, but as much as we try and not have meanings and our own ideas about what to do next, there are things out there that will influence decisions that doctors make. I mean, we can see it in the judicial system. You know, why can a convicted rapist get 5 or 6 years, but someone who posts a meme gets 10 years? And I'm just using that as an example. That's not actual fact, but we've seen it across the board.
But the Hugh Edwards case is a case in
Yeah.
point on this one. So we have Keir Starmer, who sat on the sentencing council for the guidelines that were used for Hugh Edwards' case. And there is no evidence anywhere in writing that he ever disagreed with the sentencing for these violent sex offences or the creation of a watching of child pornography. And this is a horrible subject to discuss, but the fact is we have Hugh Edwards, who is walking free right now, and then we had Lucy Connolly, who was put in prison. Now, I'm not saying what she said was right. What she said was crass. It was said out of anger, but it was no worse than Ricky Jones. And Ricky Jones had access to bail and better advice, and he then faced no jail time either. So our judicial system is not fair. I've had two cases in my life. One is of somebody I know who was raped by a Muslim, but the CPS said that it didn't hit their the amount that they needed. So it wasn't in the public interest, basically, to prosecute because they were worried about being called racist. And then I have a male friend who was falsely accused, but because he was in the political eye at the time, they then went, oh, it's in the public interest now to put that one through, even though the evidence on that was so flimsy and it was thrown out of court. So we're seeing this decision based on, ooh, do we think this is going to be a popular decision when we take it into the arena of the courts, rather than what is actually right? I believe in blind justice. We are all human, no matter how much melanin we have in our skin. We are all human beings. And I don't care the reason why somebody's punched me in the face. I want to know that that person who punched me in the face is going to be seeing the time that they should do for it. The reason behind it is, yes, it's important, but when we are going to court and we're saying, well, this person did this crime, well, does it matter? If a store gets robbed, does it matter why the person was robbing it? The person still chose to rob that store. The sociological reasons behind everything else we can look into later, but we have been told, and again, this is by design from the Fabians, that everything is around the oppressed and the oppressor. So as parents, you oppress your children. We as white people are instantly oppressors. I've never oppressed anybody, not personally. Have you?
No. And that's interesting that you bring that up, because one thing else that's happening, which they've talked about briefly, but they haven't put into practice yet, they're talking about giving judges more power, reducing jury courts. And that's a very worrying thing, because this is steadily rising more and more to dictatorship level, where that judge can give the sentence. And if there's only a handful of people in the country that can decide what happens to you, and you do not get a trial by your peers, that is a very terrifying place to be, because it then means that the judicial system, as you rightly said, is no longer blind. There's a reason why Lady Justice has a blindfold on. She does not care what you look like. She does not care where you come from. She cares about the facts at hand. And that's the way it should have always been. And I'm very concerned how the UK is heading. I do believe we are getting ready to turn a point and start stepping back. But just going back to the Fabian Society, what we were talking about at the start of the show, we drifted a little bit. Is there anywhere where they write their policies down? Is there anywhere that we can see what their plan is? Because one thing we know about the WEF, that's another society that are operating outside of jurisdiction of anywhere. They write it all on their website what they want to do with us. Agenda 2030, control, and everything else. They want us to eat bugs. I mean, it's all out there. So is there a place where we can find what they're up to?
So I did find through some searches, and actually AI was quite useful on this one. I asked AI to find out the policies on education within the Fabian Society and things like that. And it was able then to source areas where they had spoken. It was even able to go into where the people who are members had spoken at different places. It's very easy to really know what they're thinking, especially when you know that half of the cabinet are Fabian members. Well, that means the policies that they are coming up with at the moment, that's their policies, that's what they want. But the idea has always been slow and steady. So after they realized that the wolf in sheep's clothing wasn't getting the attention they wanted, it was getting very bad attention, they then changed it to a turtle, slow and steady. So it is possible to try and find it. I have heard some people saying that the Conservatives were also infiltrated by the Fabians. Now, I was I still am a member of the Conservatives, and I've been to conferences. I've never seen anything like that. What I think happened with the Conservative Party was they were infiltrated by Lib Dems rather than the actual Fabian Society. But the Fabian Society, they give you hints and tips. And one of those hints is if you look at Jeremy Corbyn, who I then found out, I said he wasn't a member in the video that I put up. And then I found out he was, but he was kicked out for being too radical. So it's not that his beliefs are not what they want, it's that he wants to do it too fast. And when we then look at how Keir Starmer tried to hoodwink us all into thinking he was so centralist, again, that's part of it. I think the very far left can often think to themselves, it's okay to lie because the cause is worth it. So if they then think it's okay to lie to us, well, they can lie about anything, can't they? And that's the worry, is a lot of this is done behind closed doors. Whereas I don't think it's quite secret handshakes. It's not quite that bad, but the whole how slow can we go is something that I think we ought to think about when we see the syllabus is coming out from education. So think about when you look at policies coming out, what could happen afterwards? How can they then tweak this further? How is this looking at that way of education which is pushing the socialist narrative? So for example, when I went to school, and so I'm 45, so when I went to school, we did talk about how communism never worked, how awful it was at school in history. And my children, and my youngest one is, he's 11, he hasn't been taught that. And my one who's in college, he hasn't been taught that too. So they've dropped teaching the dangers of communism to our children. Now, that's very subtle, but it's very important. And now we're seeing a rise in Marxist ideology coming back. And no one seems to want to teach you that Marx himself was just a horrible human being. I mean, he got his maid pregnant and then kicked her out. So she ended up with the baby in one of these workers' mills that he was trying to campaign was the worst thing. And he also took money from people who ran those mills. So he was just a terrible, terrible human being, yet people are looking to him for their ideology.
And it is a scary thing, Go back to schools. We all had hymn practice when we went to school. Now, why has all of a sudden our roots to our church disappeared? You can see, and they say this is progressive, this is moving forwards and everything. We're going down some very dark roads. And let it not be forgotten that we got to where we are in evolution and history because of some of our deep rooted beliefs and how we were brought up. I mean, I didn't know that they've stopped teaching that communism is bad. And for anyone out there, just go have a look at communism. There's never an equal playing field out there. There, they just say, they just use it as a mechanism to put people down. Instead of using money and waving money at you, they just turn around and say, what, do you not want us all to be equal? Yet they're the ones living in the plush flat in London, for argument's sake, and things like that. So that it's all about mechanisms of control is what I'm seeing. And obviously the biggest one is tax and fiat currency. They're the ones that we all respect, dare I say it. I mean, I hate it because it shouldn't be as bad as it is. But those mechanisms now are starting to fail, and they now need to look towards new things to keep the population under control, in all honesty.
Which is why they're trying to get rid of cash, isn't it? So
Yeah.
cash is king, to try and take away, more of our freedoms. Let's make sure that they can control our money. And that means then we can only spend a certain amount per day because you can only get a certain amount of money out of the cash point, or they'll start to put on a spend limit, maybe even on your card. So it also gets people into debt. And it's far easier to control people once they're in debt because they're so busy. When you're in debt, you are so busy just trying to survive that all these changes can go on without you even noticing it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely right, Emma. And, carbon credits, that's the new one that's being touted around at the moment. You, as a person, will have a value in carbon credits. That is what you are worth. And I find that shocking. And you hear about these carbon credits that are used for businesses and things. If they really wanted to save the planet, why are they allowing companies to buy other people's carbon credits so they can carry on polluting? The whole narrative that they're trying to push is all about control, pure and simple.
Absolutely. So, if this Labour government were serious about our natural environment, they would be planting trees. Instead, what they're doing is they're destroying farms. They are stopping us from digging for our own coal and our own oil. And instead, we are importing it over from China. So, if we're importing it, that surely has got a higher carbon cost. And the whole idea is now we're going to cover loads and loads of fields with solar panels rather than our car parks, our roofs. And then they say the most ridiculous thing is, oh, we're going to try and dim the sun. Sorry, you want us to have solar panels everywhere and then you're going to try and dim the sun? I mean, make that make sense to me, please. It just simply does not. So we have to go back to a much more sensible position that, you know what, our country produces 0.5% of the world's carbon, with 30% of it coming from China. So instead of us looking to go, we've got to make that zero, what we should be doing is saying, how do we improve our biodiversity, our natural world? I've got no problem with trying to help make sure that hedgehogs survive. That's brilliant. Let's plant trees. They're fantastic. But this whole nonsense that we've all got to start living like in the dark ages and no one can afford to get a boiler because we've now got to have these air sourced heat pumps, or we've got to pay 22 billion for us to have carbon capture, which they've tried in Norway for 30 years, by the way, and it does not work. They've put in millions in Norway to try and get this to work. Now we're going to have a go. It is absolutely ridiculous. So, yes, we need to be good stewards to our world. We also have to be good stewards to our people and make sure that our people can live really healthy, full, and happy lives.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And in my head, and I look at what's been going on the last 5 years, I think with the evolution of the internet, the jig is up. We're all talking to each other, and Charlie Kirk, God rest his soul, he showed us if we talk, we can actually have decent conversations and come to a mutual agreement where, dare I say, at the far left, the loonies, they don't want us all talking like human beings. And that's the problem, is the people in power at the top do not see us as human beings. They see us as a commodity. And someone said to me the other day, Paul, you do know countries are for sale. This is how things, people get elected, parties get elected, because they come together and they buy the election, because they flood everything, and because people are so busy, as you rightly said, in the debt system, they don't have a chance to look at the bigger picture. They don't have a chance to understand what's really going on, because they would never ever vote for half of these politicians. Because I'm a firm believer, Labour Party, Conservatives, Lib Dems, dare I say it, Reform as well, they're all part of what I call the Uniparty, which is they're all pushing the same policies because it's all lies, and they are all trying to bestow a narrative upon us. Because you look at Parliament, the moment those cameras are turned off, they're not shouting at each other anymore. They're shaking hands and going for a drink. That
Yes.
it's all pantomime. It really is for our benefit while they push through all their corrupt policies.
Oh, and I've seen it from a local government standpoint. So I was a borough councillor and I was a county councillor. You go into that meeting, the full council, to debate, but to be honest, everyone's already decided how they're voting on every single topic in there. It's all theatre. It's all trying to get people to say, look, aren't I brilliant? And we do want them to understand that the reason we're voting the way we are is because we think that's the right way. But this whole debate thing, it's not fooling anybody. We all know that they've already decided what they want to vote for. All we need really as residents is to know why. I want to know the why behind it. If you really think that this is a great thing. And one of the things that happened in our town is we wanted to have a brand new library. Now, and I was a Conservative councillor, and this new library was going to be fantastic. It solved the problem of an ageing building that needs to be pulled down. But Labour told everybody that we are going to destroy the library and we'll have no library. So it caused uproar, and then we lost the election and they got in. And so the library stands, but the library is still crumbling. In secret, they thought the library change was going to be fantastic. But at that point, they got the vote. So they make these decisions based on hunting for votes rather than what is right. We've got into this position where we are trying to vote for who we want to go to the pub with rather than who has the right policies. And I think as a country, we need to take a bit more responsibility ourselves to look beyond just the headlines and try and see what actually do they want. So one thing I'm really frustrated about with Kemi is I want to see policies. Show me the policies.
Yeah.
You want me to knock on doors for you? Well, I can't do that if I don't know what I'm spouting. If I'm saying, yes, we are going to deport every single illegal immigrant, brilliant. But I need other ones. I need to know exactly what you're going to do about the judicial system, the education system, the NHS. What is the actual facts of the matter here? Because we're treating it now, we're treating elections, and social media has got a part to play in this, like they are Britain's Got Talent. And it's we need to start waking up ourselves. It's brilliant to see the country is waking up. You know, we had a massive march with, I'd imagine, about 1 million people there. But again, the mainstream media want to play that down and they want to say there was all this trouble. Well, actually, friends I had who were there said that the police tried to direct them down the wrong way. Luckily, that person had done a recce and knew that the Stand Up to Racism crowd were down that road, so they went the opposite way. But plenty were sent by the police. Now, probably an accident, let's be fair to the police, but they sent them down towards them. And then when they got there, they were chanting Charlie's in a box to try and inflame them. So it's not just as simple as going, oh, look at all those racists. If you think really that there are 1 million racists in this country who wanted to go down there, and not all of them were white people, then we have got a much bigger problem in our country, don't you think? I mean, the fact is those people were there because they were fed up of being silenced. They were fed up of this government trying to say that being British is something we should be ashamed of. That's why they were there. Yes, there was, of course, the question about illegal immigration too. But even that, to say that being against unvetted illegal immigrants is racist, is a very lazy way of trying to do politics. And I think we need to all rise above that and start discussing the actual issues rather than just slinging mud.
Couldn't agree more, Emma. Couldn't agree more. And I was at that march and I managed to make it down the actual organised path all the way to Parliament Square. And it was only afterwards I found out that they didn't realise quite how many people went. That's how big this was. The police were that worried about the amount of people that were going to pile into Parliament Square. As you rightly said, they diverted them off in a different direction towards the counter protest. What baffles me is how they allowed a counter protest to take place. Bearing in mind they were massively outnumbered, it was always going to kick off. But interesting statistic, I think 26 people were arrested. 17 of them were the liberal far left anti whatever fascists. So you've got to sit there and go, yeah, you can see this is all smoke and mirrors. This is them trying to create this narrative. And we hear it time and time again. And it's true. It is all about a narrative. And just going back to your point just a minute ago, Liz Truss is actually doing quite a lot to expose the system at the moment. I watched an interview with her. She said the Prime Minister doesn't make the policies. Bank of England, they go to the Prime Minister and say, well, these are the things we're willing to bankroll for you. So the Prime Minister doesn't have a huge amount of power. Yes, inside the cronies, but the money all comes from them. And they're the ones that really dictate the policies. And that just blew my mind when she outed them for that.
Absolutely. And if we go back to the Fabian Society, part of their whole thing was to get in charge of the economics of it all. So when we look at what happened with Liz Truss, for example, and they said that it was her actions alone that caused this massive crash. The Bank of England have now admitted that it wasn't Liz Truss. But it's so late now that people still talk about how it was her. And let's be fair, the situation now is far worse and no one seems to be bothered. Isn't that interesting? And that's because, again, with the Fabians, they have managed to get hold of the mainstream media, which is why I love watching these really independent social media, news independent journalists who are going around and they're exposing it all. And I'm not going to put myself amongst those at the moment, but I do want to keep going forwards to compare policies so that people have a really easy to understand platform where they can go. I have been honest, though. I have got my own political beliefs. I'm not going to pretend I haven't. I'm not going to pretend to be independent like the BBC does, even though we know that the BBC isn't independent. Because everyone has their own belief systems. So I'm going to try and make it really accessible for people to understand what is going on. And I really want more people to do that. If you've got a voice, use it. That is how we fight this. We fight this by all being our own little Charlie Kirk, that we refuse to be bullied, refuse to be silenced. We go out there with bold courage and determination, not with violence, but with our voices, with our hearts, with our minds. That is exactly what we do. And I am a Christian. So it's another thing I share with Charlie Kirk. And I'd suggest you get to know a bit more about our Christian roots as a nation. I'm not saying you have to suddenly become Christian, but go and understand it. Go and understand what the Bible means and why in this country we developed the way we did. Because when you look at then those Christian morals and where we've come from to where we are, you can understand that when we started to break free of the Christianity in I think the 80s, they tried to take, God out of schools more and more. That is when we started to see the slide down. We do need to have, that upper moral status that we look to, which says we have been told how to behave as human beings. We have a guidebook on how we create a good and moral society. The more we ignore that, the more you can see that this very left wing, which don't forget, Marx hated Christianity, he hated religion. He also loved slavery, by the way, that this awful ideology, and I'll say that quite blatantly, it is an awful ideology, this communism, that we have seen that rise the more and more we take away God from the equation. Let's bring it back in. Even if you don't believe in it yourself, just go and learn.
Fantastic, Emma. Well, that brings us to the end of the show for today. Emma, where can everybody find you?
So I have a TikTok channel. It's put in Emma Marshall. I am on loads of other social media, but I find it hasn't really hit off, and also you can only do 3-minute videos, so to try and get everything in, they do tend to go to about 4 minutes, so it isn't a very really quick TikToks where it's just me dancing. You won't see me dancing. I'm far too old and middle-aged for that now, so you will see me instead talking on TikTok about these ideas. I have got an Instagram, but on all of them just put in Emma Marshall.
Fantastic. Well, Emma, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, everybody, for watching us today. All that's left for me to say is to take care, God bless, and see you all soon. Bye now.